This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Islamic State claims responsibility for another suicide bombing that kills nearly 50 people at an Afghan mosque. China's Shenzhou 13 crew begins its 6-month mission aboard the country's first space station. And Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok presents roadmap out of the country's crisis. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, Nigeria's external debt stock to surge to record high of $45 billion. And in sports, Egypt champions Zamalek wary of Kenya's Tusker FC threat ahead of their CAF Champions League clash in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live. We begin the top of the hour in the United Kingdom, where tributes are pouring in for Sir David Amess. The longtime British lawmaker was fatally stabbed on Friday during a public event in Essex. Andrew Wilson has more.
The attack was brutal and swift. Sir David Amess, a 69-year-old politician of nearly 4 decades' experience, was meeting his local constituents in a Methodist church hall, one of many locations he used to meet the people he represented. Police say a man in his 20s approached Sir David and stabbed him repeatedly. He's said to have died at the scene, where a 25-year-old man was arrested. The news quickly spread shock to his constituents, fellow MPs, and the wider public. The Prime Minister cut short a meeting in the West Country to return to London. His wife, Carrie Johnson, described Sir David, who was married with 5 children, as a kind and good man, so completely unjust, she said. Tributes appeared from his colleagues in the Conservative Party, from Michael Gove, who talked of his kindness, from Education Secretary Nadeem Sahawi, and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who described his death as heartbreaking. Sir David Amess was a religious man. He was an old-school, long-standing Member of Parliament with a reputation for integrity, kindness, and for working hard on his constituents' behalf. Attacks on MPs in their home constituencies are rare. But in 2016, a Labour MP, Jo Cox, was brutally murdered in her constituency. In 2010, fellow Labour MP Stephen Timms was attacked, and a Liberal Democrat politician, Andrew Pennington, was murdered in 2000. This attack will raise once more the issue of MP safety. It's a cornerstone of British politics that parliamentarians are accessible to the public and is valued highly across the political spectrum. But there will be some that say that idea, no matter how valued, might have had its day. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
Well, let's get more details on that story now. CGTN's Andrew Wilson, who we just heard from there, joins us live now with the latest. Andrew, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has visited the church where the lawmaker was stabbed to death in Leigh-on-Sea. What has he said?
Well, it was quite a moving visit this morning, Mahia, as the Prime Minister, alongside the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, 2 people who do not normally get on particularly well, walking side by side to lay wreaths at the spot where Sir David was killed. The Prime Minister also made a statement earlier on in which he described how shocked and saddened everybody was. He said that Sir David was one of the kindest, nicest, most gentle people in politics, but he also had an outstanding record of passing laws on behalf of the most valuable. So Boris went on to say, David was a man who believed passionately in this country and its future, and we've lost today a fine public servant, a much-loved friend and colleague, and our thoughts are very much with his wife and his children and family. So David leaves behind a wife and 5 children from his marriage. Now, he was an MP for a long time in this particular constituency east of London. A best part of 37 years he was there, so he was a well-known figure in the community. He was not an MP who had ministerial ambitions. He preferred to work on behalf of and in the location of the people that he represented. So his surgeries, as they're called, were commonplace. They happened a lot. They happened a lot in different locations, and he was someone who had a lot of relationships with the local communities, so they are also extremely shocked. Essex Police have handed over lead of the investigation to the counter-terrorism police, and they have now declared this a terrorism incident. The 25-year-old man who was arrested, as I mentioned in my report there, is the only person they say they're seeking in connection with this inquiry. They say he's a British national of Somali heritage, and that's as much as we know. They are not seeking anyone else in connection with the incident.
All right, Andrew Wilson, thank you very much for your insights there. CGTN's Andrew Wilson joining us live from London. Moving on, the Islamic State has claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing at a Shiite mosque in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar. The attack happened during Friday prayers when the mosque was packed with worshippers. A Taliban official says at least 47 people have died. It is the second week in a row that a suicide bomber has attacked worshippers at Friday prayers. Shiite clerics are calling for more security for their holy sites. Zmarialai Abbasin reports from the capital, Kabul.
After a week from northeastern Kunduz province, which killed 200 people or injured, and at the same time, southern Kandahar province was targeted again and on a mosque of Shiite Muslims where there were more than 150 worshippers inside the mosque. According to the witness, there were at least 3 suicide bombers. The first one entered to the mosque and started shooting over the worshippers inside and killed and injured several people and blew himself inside the mosque. And the second one right in the corridor of the mosque, and the third suicide attacker also exploded his explosive at the main gate. There were also shootings in the area which also killed or injured several people. When dozens are killed or injured on Friday prayers afternoon in Kandahar, much more concerns are emerging about the security in the country and the threats by the ISKP in the country. After Kunduz attack, this is the second one, just 1 week after the similar attack. So there are much more concern about the future and the activities of the ISKP or Daesh in the country. The Taliban police chief in Kandahar say the people asked weapons to protect and safeguard the mosque, and they distributed the weapons. But according to him, they were not able. That's why they will appoint their own units in similar areas. Zmarialai Abbasin, CGTN, Kabul.
And Zmarialai Abbasin now joins us live from Kabul to bring us the latest on that attack. Zmarialai, what is the latest in the aftermath of that suicide attack on the Shiite mosque in Afghanistan? Zmarialai, we're just trying to find out what is the latest on the ground in the aftermath of that attack. Well, we don't seem to have Zmarialai. We do apologize for that. Moving on now, Saturday saw successful liftoff, docking and entering of the module for China's Shenzhou 13 mission. 3 astronauts have entered China's space station. CGTN's Sun Ye has more.
The Shenzhou 13 crew has arrived and settled in their home in space, officially starting a 6-month and the longest day ever planned for Chinese taikonauts. Barely 7 hours since the crew's launch from Jiuquan Satellite Center in northwestern China's Gansu. After midnight Saturday, they already set one record, as Shenzhou 13 docked with the Tianhe core module by executing a radio rendezvous for the first time.
Rendezvous and docking from a radial direction is risky. That's why particularly had Shenzhou 12 tested out the process before it left. Shenzhou 13's docking is great in every way, completely in alignment with our design.
And the mission is now gearing up for more challenges with the longer stay in space.
The mission will have 3 people for a 180-day stay. It's challenging for taikonauts and spacecrafts, including the manned spaceship. The long period of time gives uncertainties. For one, the longer you stay out, the more external influences and impacts you will meet. There are also internal effects from time. While we have fully tested out on the ground, you can also say you have really done this when you complete it in space. I think of it as a long battle.
It will be an intense 6 months for the taikonauts too. Their itinerary includes spacewalks, verification of key technology, installation of new equipment, scientific experiments, and some remote teaching, all from some 400 kilometers above Earth. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's turn to the United States now, where former Trump advisor Steve Bannon could face criminal contempt charges. A congressional committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riots says it'll move forward with charges if Bannon defies a subpoena and refuses to testify. Nathan King reports from Washington, D.C.
So, 9 months after the insurrection, the coup attempt, if you want to call it that, in the Capitol on January the 6th, the select committee that's investigating this is getting very, very serious indeed. As you know, subpoenas were issued to key members of the Trump administration and also outside advisors, Steve Bannon being the most interesting. As you know, he left the White House in around 2017, but he's claiming executive privilege after Donald Trump, the former president, basically urged all defendants to do so. The problem is that executive privilege usually means official duties within the White House. He was out of the White House, he was holding radio shows and podcasts, encouraging people to come up and make a big demonstration and use some language which they really want to get to the bottom of about whether this was a connection between Republicans who supported Donald Trump and the masses that we saw swarm the Capitol. Now, essentially what's going to happen is that the Select Committee in the House here, which is made up mainly Democrats but also Republicans, is going to vote for a criminal contempt for him not complying and not appearing in front of Congress. Others that are subpoenaed that have basically were in the administration. I'm talking about Mark Meadows, the Chief of Staff, Kash Patel, who's a defense official, Dan Scavino, who's a key member of the staff and in charge of a lot of his social media, may have more of a case because they were actually in the administration. But essentially, what's quite interesting about the whole White House approach here is they're willing to waive this whole idea of executive privilege, the idea that the president can keep secret information in his tasks as president, because they said this is not under the control of the presidency. Meanwhile, of course, the wheels of justice grind on. Over 500 people arrested, a lot of plea bargains going on, but a lot of jail time for people who actually carried out these attacks at the suggestion, if not the direction, of President Trump and his staff. Nathan King, CGTN, just outside the Capitol.
Well, let's take you back to our earlier story where we reported the Islamic State has claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing at a Shiite mosque in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar. The attack happened during Friday prayers when the mosque was packed with worshippers. A Taliban official says at least 47 people have died in that attack. Well, let's get more on that story now. CGTN's Zmarialai Abbasin is standing by for us in Kabul with the latest. Zmarialai, what can you tell us is the latest in the aftermath of that attack?
Hello, Mahia. Well, that was a deadly attack took place on Friday prayers afternoon when two suicide bombers of the ISKP affiliates entered the mosque. The first one exploded himself right in front of the main gate of the mosque, and the second one entered and started firing over the worshippers and killed 47 injured, at least 70 more, and the Taliban and also health authorities in Kandahar confirmed. The ISKP published a statement claiming the responsibility for that attack and calling their fighters with surnames of Khorasani and Baluch this time. According to them, they were calling the mosque a temple, and they targeted, and that there is a claim that there have been killed dozens of the people, and that's another catastrophe after the attack on northeastern Kunduz province, which killed dozens and also injured around 100 more. This is now emerging concerns among the people in Afghanistan and also criticizing the Taliban government in the country, because it's just the second time in a week that the ISKP targeting the Shiite Muslims in the country right inside of the mosque. But the Taliban police chief in Kandahar said that the people asked them to distribute them the weapon, and they did so, but it failed, and the attackers were able to enter the mosque. According to him, that they will be protecting and safeguarding the mosque and other places by their own special units in the future, and the Taliban seems to be taking actions in this regard. But it's now a challenging part of the time that the Taliban are faced by the ISKP in the country, and of course it would be threatening the country.
All right, Zmarialai, thank you very much. CGTN's Zmarialai Abbasin in Kabul. You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. It's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up. Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok presents roadmap out of the country's crisis. And over 50 people arrested for kidnapping 3 parliamentarians in South Africa.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's turn to Sudan now, where the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has unveiled a roadmap to end what he described as the country's worst and most dangerous political crisis in its 2-year transition. Sudan's military and civilian power-sharing partners have been locked in a war of words since a coup attempt in late September. Military leaders have been demanding the reform of the cabinet and ruling coalition. Civilian politicians, on the other hand, are accusing the military of aiming for a power grab. Hamdok describes the current conflict as between those who believe in a transition towards democracy and civilian leadership and those who do not.
This problem leads to deep divisions between the military and civilians, and between civilians and the military. That is why I want to repeat that the struggle is not between civilians and the military, but between the transitional democratic civilian camp and the coup overthrowing the revolution. The coup attempt opened the door for discord and for all the hidden disputes and accusations from all sides, and in this way, we are throwing the future of our country, of our people and revolution to the wind.
Well, CGTN's Naba Mohideen joins us via Skype in Khartoum to bring us the latest. Naba, what is the reaction so far in Khartoum to the Prime Minister's speech? Naba, hope you can hear us. I'll begin by asking you, what has been the reaction in Khartoum to the Prime Minister's speech there? Well, unfortunately, we do not have Naba Mohideen. We will try to get her later on. To South Africa now, where more than 50 people have been arrested for kidnapping after 2 South African cabinet ministers and a deputy minister were taken hostage. The 3 leaders were, after many hours, rescued by police. Security forces had to move in to free the government officials who were held against their will in a Pretoria hotel during a meeting that turned sour. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
It was a drama-filled night as 3 government ministers were held hostage by military veterans demanding compensation for the role they played in the fight against apartheid. The Defense Minister Thandi Modise had Deputy Thabang Makwetla and Minister in the Presidency Mondli Gungubele were kept in this hotel in the capital Pretoria.
Our intentions was to start a meeting and first listen to them what exactly they wanted the meeting to do, because we were very careful about assuming. We could not move beyond that point. We proposed the agenda, we could not move beyond that point because they demanded that the president, the deputy president should be there. And our attitude, Mawande, is that the president is the head of the state together with the deputy president. We think it is not fair to expect the president to be everywhere, wherever he is wanted.
When the talks broke down, the military veterans refused to let the three leaders leave the venue.
As we were proceeding to the door, we realized that the doors were being locked. And we realized that, yeah, it's no longer as exciting as it started. So I will be unfair to say they beat us. No. We were there against our will, but it was not a violent, sort of stay.
When attempts to negotiate with the hostage takers failed, special forces stormed the room and took the two cabinet ministers and the deputy minister to safety. This is not the first incident that points to state security failure here in South Africa. In July, over 300 people died after riots broke out. The riots were sparked by the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. Questions are now being asked about whether these incidents are indicative of a failed state.
I don't think so. I think South Africa is being put to a test. I think thus far we must be proud that even though yesterday, yes, police came in to break up the hostage situation, so far we have been able to hold it very, very tightly. For the state not to go overboard in the use of force, for the state to listen more than it uses force, and I think that is a plus for the democracy of South Africa.
The 56 people remain in custody. The ministers have made it clear that while they will continue to engage with those who held them hostage, they will not drop the charges against them. The culprits are expected to appear in court next week. Yulisa Njabela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
The World Health Organization says it's deploying experts on preventing sexual exploitation in 10 high-risk countries. The plan is being finalized and outlines immediate or short-term actions through March 2022 to complete investigations and launch a series of internal reviews and audits. The WHO says this will ensure a wholesome reform of WHO structures and culture. The move comes after a major scandal occurred in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where its staff and other aid workers abused women. Some 83 aid workers, a quarter of them employed by the WHO, were reportedly involved in sexual exploitation and abuse during the country's massive Ebola epidemic from 2018 to 2020, an independent commission said last month. Well, CGTN's Chris Ochamringa joins us live now from DR Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Chris, how has in the past the WHO dealt with victims of sexual abuse in the DRC?
Well, what has happened is the WHO has the independent panel that conducted this research about the sexual abuse recommended that a team of experts from the WHO be sent to Beni in the eastern part of the DRC where this sexual abuse cases happened to identify the 21 women who are victims of this sexual abuse and to assess the needs that they have. This assessment is going to be done on a case-by-case basis, and it's upon that assessment that they will determine the kind of help that they will offer to these women. It will range from psychosocial support to financial support. At the moment, WHO says they do not want to announce, offering financial assistance to the people because they fear that many people might come up with fake claims. And so the WHO has also said that they will open criminal proceedings against all the perpetrators who carried out these horrific acts in eastern DRC during the Ebola outbreak, so that the people, the victims, can get some justice from that. Mahia?
And Chris, we're hearing that the WHO has said it will deploy experts on preventing sexual exploitation. Just how important is this then in preventing sexual abuse, and how has the government reacted to this?
Well, first of all, Mahia, they have already sent an expert on the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse. A lady from Haiti is already in Beni. She has been training the people who are going to help the DRC to try and contain the new cases of Ebola. There are 2 confirmed cases so far, and this is something that has brought some relief to the local people. It's brought some sense of, understanding that the WHO is taking this matter very seriously and is keen to ensure that it doesn't happen again. The people in that area have expressed their concern that the WHO is taking steps to stop this kind of act from happening. Well, the DRC government expressed, many officials, especially the president, condemned the sexual abuse in Eastern DRC, and very many Congolese were also outraged that these acts were committed by people, from reputable organizations like the WHO and other UN agencies. The DRC has had very many cases of sexual abuse, particularly in the east of the country. Some NGOs have described that part as the rape capital of the world, because very many rebel groups operating there use sex as a weapon of war. And so people were very, very disturbed that this happened, but they have been demanding, most of the Congolese have been demanding compensation for all the victims. They're saying it's good that the WHO has acknowledged this and that they are punishing the people, but they want the people to be compensated financially so that they can rebuild their lives. This is something that hasn't happened yet, but the WHO says that they're in the process of ensuring that they bring some relief to the victims of this sexual abuse in the DRC. Mahia?
Chris, obviously a rather distressing report there. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa bringing us the latest from Kinshasa. Moving on, in the Central African Republic, President Faustin-Archange Touadéra has declared a unilateral cessation of fighting against armed groups. In a televised address on Friday, President Touadéra said the ceasefire will help to protect civilians from violence and allow them to access humanitarian aid. The leader of the CAR also hopes the ceasefire will lead to peaceful dialogue. The CAR has seen recurrent rounds of rebel violence since former President François Bozizé was ousted in 2013. Armed groups control large swathes of territory, and over 700,000 people have been displaced. The World Food Programme has adjusted its approach to food assistance in Uganda by increasing rations to the most vulnerable refugee communities. In the past, ration cuts have been equal across the board, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable refugees. Uganda has 1.4 million refugees, mostly from South Sudan and the DR Congo. Isabel Nakiria now reports.
The WFP says refugee settlements with the highest levels of need will now be able to get the support they need to survive. Over the past 2 years, declining funding has forced the WFP to cut rations. Refugees hit hardest are those living in the West Nile region, which includes those in Bidibidi, Ivepi, Palorenya and Rhino settlements. They will now receive food rations of 70%, up from 60% that all other refugees were getting since February 2021. About 530 refugees will benefit from this increment. The WFP says settlements in the West Nile region are congested and many refugees there are unable to meet their daily needs.
What we found was the settlements in the north, in West Nile in particular, are the most vulnerable. They have the most challenges meeting the gaps between their own production, their own small income, and their daily requirements. So there, what we've done is we've actually increased the rations.
The settlements in the southwest of the country have access to more land for cultivation and are more food secure. The food agency says their rations have been reduced to 40%. But even with the adjustments made, the WFP warns it still has a shortfall of $57 million to enable it meet the assistance that refugees need over the next 6 months.
The resourcing requirements are high, the needs of the refugees are high, and the resourcing environment in Uganda and globally is challenging, given the increased needs across the world and then the economic challenges faced because of COVID-19.
WFP says it will be assessing the adjustments in the next few months and identifying the challenges faced by the very vulnerable so that some more protective support is added to the package. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
UNESCO's chair in African food systems, Professor Julian May, has expressed concern about Western seed companies profiting from monocultured genetically modified crops in Africa. May says such plants have seriously affected the ecological balance in that area. At the same time, some Western companies are profiting from dumping large amounts of cheap junk food in Africa. This has worsened the situation in Africa's food system, which has been affected by poverty, conflict, and climate change. May has praised China for constantly respecting farmers on the continent and urged other countries to borrow a leaf from the Chinese people.
I've visited China a few times, and now more and more people are eating a product which is both healthy and affordable and generating jobs on this farm. So I think that's one example. I think the medium-sized farms that China has continued to have, which have largely been given up in many Western countries, again are something which would enable us to be able to employ more people on the land and make farming a respectable career. I get a sense in talking to Chinese people that farmers are respected and are seen as important. And I think that again is something that we've often lost in other countries of the world.
And it's just about time for all the latest in business here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria's external debt stock to surge to record high of $45 billion. And Zimbabwe negotiates power supply deals with Zambia and Mozambique.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Welcome back. It's time for the latest in business, and we begin in Zimbabwe as the country negotiates new power supply deals with Zambia and Mozambique as it tries to address a crippling power shortage that has led to rolling power cuts across the country.
According to Energy Minister Soda Jemu, a delegation from the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, ZESA, traveled to Zambia this week to try to negotiate a power import deal with indications that some 100 megawatts of excess electricity from Zambia's Kafue Gorge hydropower station could be secured. An additional 180 megawatts is being sought from Zambia, which could cut the current electricity shortfall to about 300 megawatts per day. Zimbabwe has been experiencing a power crisis due to reduced generation at the aging main thermal power station and the Kariba hydropower plant, where repairs to the dam wall are underway. The challenges are expected to ease when 2 new units that will generate a combined 300 megawatts of energy at the Hwange thermal power station are commissioned in 2022. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, Nigeria's external debt stock is set to hit an all-time high of $45 billion following the government's request to Parliament to approve fresh financing to fund its budget deficit. As CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports, authorities in Africa's topmost economy are seeking legislator approval for a fresh external borrowing to the tune of $5 billion.
A total of nearly $5 billion in foreign loans. That's what Nigeria's government is seeking to borrow from the World Bank, French Development Agency and Exim Bank. President Muhammadu Buhari's request comes barely 2 months after Parliament approved an earlier request to borrow $8.3 billion and 490 million euros in loans. He says the funds are part of an initial borrowing plan for the 2018 to 2020 budget.
I personally think it is completely irresponsible to borrow for recurrent expenditure or to borrow for consumption, to borrow to fund the budget. When you look at the structure of the Nigerian budget, you will find out that in the 2020 budget, this current budget, the Nigerian government is using about 90% of its revenues, inflows, to what? To service loans. So it is actually a very negative and unproductive trajectory that the administration is leaning toward.
Nigeria is facing one of its toughest times after barely climbing out of a recession, its second in less than 5 years. The World Bank says the West African nation's revenue to GDP ratio fell to about 6% last year, making it the lowest in the world. Its revenue has seen 37% decline over the past 6 years and has been worsened by the pandemic-led downturn.
Nobody borrows against GDP. You actually borrow against your revenues. We're focusing more on spending, okay, than creating, generating revenue. Nigeria is not generating as much revenue. And how do we generate revenue? That should be the conversation.
Nigeria's external debt profile has increased rapidly by 366% since 2015. The nation's total outstanding foreign debt was $9.7 billion before Buhari assumed office. By the end of March, the Debt Management Office posted an official foreign debt of $32.9 billion. If the latest request is approved, foreign borrowings in 2021 alone will total nearly $13 billion.
There's nothing wrong with borrowing, okay? If we're building factories, if we're building human capacity, if we're building the hospitals, if we're building the educational system. We now have this huge cost of governance. Fund management is a problem because we spend so much to maintain, the government, the people in government and the institutions.
Some experts warn that Nigeria's rising debt could scare away prospective foreign investors from the country if not checked.
This huge debt profile creates investor pessimism. And investor pessimism, it reduces the amount of foreign direct inflows that you have. And once you have all those uncertainties within the Nigerian economy, the Naira is unstable.
Government says the loans are meant for projects to help the nation realize its economic sustainability plan with focus across key sectors such as infrastructure, health, agriculture and food security, energy and COVID-19. Experts advise government to concentrate on its diversification agenda and build infrastructures to boost revenue and reduce borrowing. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, in Tunisia, the financial sector's contribution to boost private investment rose 16.4% in 2020 compared to 9.8% recorded in the previous year. According to Tunisia's Financial Market Council, the increase was driven by lending to the small and medium-sized enterprise and venture capital sectors. CGTN's Adnan Chawashi has the latest on the data.
The Financial Market Council report noted the return of listings on the Tunis Stock Exchange with the entry of Assurance Maghribiya on the main market. The listing generated an additional market capitalization of $88 million. This was the first public offer at the Tunis Stock Exchange since 2018 and the unique IPO in 2020. The number of listed companies reached 80 in December 2020.
Despite the difficulties we faced last year, we introduced a new company, Assurance Maghribiya, with a capitalization of $88 million. The second positive indicator is that we've preserved foreign investment in spite of the pandemic in Tunisia.
The annual report also shed light on the strategy which was adopted to deal with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic on the national financial market.
2020 was the year of the global health crisis, which hit all sectors including the financial market. Yet Tunisia's financial market report showed resilience in the face of the crisis. We've ended the year with a moderate decline of around 3% of the level of the indicator. We ranked third in the Arab world in terms of annual performance.
The president of the Financial Market Council informed the head of state about new provisions to reinforce good governance requirements within listed companies.
I'm aware of how some corrupt individuals managed to enter and control the financial market in Tunisia at the end of the 1990s. This operation was made possible by some brokers in the stock exchange who specialized in theft and fraud. Now things have changed and we're determined to show the world that Tunisia is pushing for transparency and good governance in the financial market.
Financial analysts stress the importance of the venture capital sector in terms of boosting the equity capital of SMEs and creating jobs in Tunisia. According to the Central Bank of Tunisia, venture capital investments helped create 8,000 direct jobs in 2020. According to the Financial Market Council, the Tunis Stock Exchange has not seen a massive withdrawal of foreign investors. Thus, the share of foreigners in the market capitalization recorded a slight increase compared to 2019 from 24.7 to 25.2%. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Africa, with its internationally recognized musical talent and growing mobile phone use, is central to Swedish music streamer Spotify's plans to extend its reach to 1 billion customers. The efforts to collaborate with telecommunication companies are set to boost revenue and help increase essential subscribers to the music platform.
As African artists are streamed across the world, the continent was seen as an obvious choice and is home to more than a third of Spotify's 85 new markets. The problem is payment on a continent where many people are more likely to have a mobile phone than a bank account.
One of the things that we did when we moved into Kenya was just to make sure that we were able to secure alternative payment methods. Some parts of Africa, a lot of African countries are unbanked, so that means they don't use credit cards. And this is very true of a lot of East Africa. In Kenya, you use M-Pesa for the most part. So we ensured to make sure that there was that facility so that the fans don't have so many barriers to access to music, which is something we should all be able to enjoy.
Most of us have access to our phones, but not most of us have cards and not most of us have bank accounts. So it's just important, since our phones are always with us, it's important to just make it easy for us to pay through our phones.
Owned by Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom's M-Pesa is used to send money, save, borrow, and make payments for goods and services. Elsewhere in Africa, Spotify is seeking other collaborators.
I chose M-Pesa because it just goes direct, and then it won't cut. I have to put my PIN, so I have to, let's say, I have to authorize it. Yeah, because when you use M-Pesa, you have to give the authority for your money to be used, you know? So it's better like that. And it's cheaper when you use M-Pesa also.
Music producer Charles Otieno says the streaming platform is helping artists like him to monitor streaming numbers and to see who's listening to their music.
You know, on Spotify we have Spotify for Artists. So we were not even able to access the Spotify for Artists because it wasn't in Kenya. So when it came to Kenya, now we can access Spotify for Artists. You can see the logs. You can see how your music is basically growing.
Spotify's local rivals, such as Kenya-based and Danish-listed Mdundo and Nigeria-headquartered Boomplay, have also started to build ties with mobile operators.
Spotify is continuing to ensure that we are having the right conversations with the right partners to ensure that we are providing solutions to payment problems that several African consumers face in different parts of the continent.
Such partnerships are based on telecom providers selling music bundles that give customers access to a streaming company's premium service and exclusively curated music mixes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Stay with us here on Africa Live. There's still plenty more to come, including the first state-run hospital in Africa to offer robotic surgery set to open in South Africa. Now to South Africa, where a hospital in Cape Town has become the first state-run healthcare facility in Africa to offer robotic surgeries. The cutting-edge technology is said to have a long-term benefit on the local public healthcare system. Travers Andrews has more with this report.
It is a historic milestone for Cape Town's Robotic Hospital, as it became the first public hospital on the continent to offer robotic surgeries. The healthcare facility unveiled their new Da Vinci XI surgical robot, which is able to carry out complex surgeries with pinpoint precision.
The robot provides the precision with which the operation is done. The surgeon still controls the instruments, so the surgeon is able to manipulate the instruments, but there is a lot more precision with the robot. There's less blood loss. The operation itself, because it's just a small incision that is made, is non-invasive, and therefore the patient's recovery time is a lot faster afterwards with fewer post-operative complications.
Costing the taxpayer just over $2.5 million, the surgical robot will allow Robotic to provide improved services, especially during the pandemic.
Patients will have a shorter length of stay in hospital, they'll have better outcomes from their surgical services, and in fact this system can in fact allow us to treat patients with urological problems, but also extend it to patients with colorectal problems, with thoracic problems, as well as gynecological problems. So all patients in those categories will in fact benefit from this service.
As an academic teaching hospital, medical students are also set to benefit from the robotic surgeries unit.
As a major teaching hospital in the Western Cape, obviously we'll be able to train our younger surgeons in the latest and newest technology. And this will in fact equip them in far better to be able to provide these services in public as well as in the private service in South Africa.
For now, the surgical robot joins 7 others in South Africa that are located within the private healthcare system, all of which are expected to provide better healthcare for all South Africans. The Western Cape's Department of Health plans to utilize the robotic surgical unit to not only address the backlog in procedures, but broaden surgical services. Now, the waiting time for sometimes life-saving surgery may be reduced, and more members of the public can have access to surgical procedures only offered in the private healthcare sector. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Right, it's just about time for the sport here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Egyptian champions Zamalek wary of Kenya's Tusker FC threat ahead of their CAF Champions League clash in Nairobi.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome back. We kick off the sport with the CAF Champions League, where Egyptian champions Zamalek are in Nairobi to take on Kenyan title holders Tusker in the first leg of their second-round qualifier on Saturday. Zamalek are among the African club football heavyweights that will join the elite competition at this stage. The White Knights from Cairo trained at the Nyayo National Stadium match venue on Friday morning as they seek to qualify to the lucrative group stages of the Champions League. However, Zamalek will not remember their last game in Nairobi fondly after they were stunned 4-2 by the then Kenyan champions Gor Mahia in the CAF Confederations Cup. Head coach Patrice Carteron said his team will do their best to leave with a first leg advantage, considering his star players are only just returning from international duty with Egypt.
You know, in football, especially in Champions League, we all know that you have a lot of good teams in Africa, and it's really hard to, if you are not ready 100% mentally, especially, we know it can be a hard game. So we do prepare ourselves as best as we can regarding the circumstances to have a good result, of course. we want to qualify for the next round in the Champions League. So we know we have to beat the champion of Kenya. That is not easy, but we respect this opponent, but we want to win, of course.
Meanwhile, Tusker FC coach Robert Matano says they will have the momentum ahead of their CAF Champions League clash against Zamalek. Matano and his team trained at the match venue on Friday afternoon, confident that they can cause a huge upset against the five-time African club champions on Saturday. Tusker beat Artas Sola 7 of Djibouti 4-1 on aggregate to sail into the second round, where they landed a glamour tie against Zamalek. Matano and his captain Eugene Asike believe they have enough in their ranks to trouble the Cairo Giants, as they rallied local fans to get behind the team that will start the match as massive underdogs. The winner of the two-legged tie will advance to the group stages of the competition, with the loser dropping to the second-tier Confederations Cup.
We are ready as Tusker, and we are Kenya. We represent the country. We must make our country be proud because of tomorrow's match. Zamalek is a good team. They are champions of Africa, but they are beatable. So as I select my players ready to play with the Zamalek, and our intention is to win here so that we can plan for next match.
Yes, they are champions. We're also champions. So we are going out there. For us, we know it's a good side with quality players, with experienced players. But once we walk onto that field, I believe it will be 11 against 11. We have our work well cut out, and we need to go out there and give our all, believe in ourselves, show great teamwork and great team spirit tomorrow's game.
In total, 7 games are on the cards in the Champions League qualifiers round 2 first leg fixtures on Saturday. Here is how they stack up. In some of the other matches, title holders and record champions Al Ahly of Egypt are away to USGN of Niger, while Tunisian side Etoile du Sahel will make the trip to Rwanda to face APR. ASEC Mimosa of Cote d'Ivoire face a daunting home tie against last season's quarter-finalists CR Belouizdad of Algeria. Now, the chief suspect in the murder of Kenyan distance runner and two-time World Championship bronze medalist Agnes Tirop will be arraigned in court soon, local police confirmed on Friday. Ibrahim Rotich, the husband to the deceased athlete and main suspect in the killing, was arrested in